welcome into the Cubs Weekly podcast presented by Wintrust, proud legacy partner of the Chicago Cubs and exclusive home of Cubs Checking. Open online today at wintrust.com/Cubs Weekly. Tony Andracki here with Andy Martinez, and we have a really fun podcast for you guys. We're going to answer a bunch of your questions as submitted via Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then, honestly, a couple just have randomly popped up here and there. So it's all things Cubs, it's MLB offseason. There's some fun, nerdy ones in there too, which, Andy, I know you're very excited about. So we have a lot of fun with this. It's kind of a perfect time with this in the offseason in general. So let's start off with our sponsor from Wintrust, which I was surprised to see this. On Facebook, they submitted a question. Great one to start us off. Andy, who are some Cubs players that you think will break out next season?
That was a really good one. I have to agree. When I first saw that, I'm like, oh, sweet. Like, they're in it. We're going to have some fun. My initial go-to reaction was Hayden Wesneski, and that's kind of a cop-out because he kind of broke out, but I think he really will come into his own in 2023. I think he's going to be with the Cubs for, barring health through the whole season. I think he's really going to be a really key arm coming here in 2023.
I think it kind of depends on how you define breakout, because to me, I think Seiya Suzuki's breakout is coming. Mm-hmm. And I think you can already argue that, sure, he broke out. Like, he was a valuable defense, just overall. He was worth 2 WAR in his first rookie season. Like, he's a good outfielder, has a good, strong arm. He flashed at the plate at various points. But I think the Seiya Suzuki that we've seen is just scratching the surface. Yeah. So I believe he will break out. He has talked about how he hopes and the potential is that he is an all-star player in the future. I think that's possible. Hayden Wesneski is a great one. Looking just back at 2022, I think we can say that Keegan Thompson and Justin Steele were breakout players in different regards.
Nico Horner, too.
Nico Horner, Christopher Morel. And then, honestly, another one that I'm thinking about is Brennan Davis. Yeah. I think Brennan Davis, if he is healthy, he has a good chance, I would say good chance, of even making the opening day roster because of how advanced he was. We thought we would see him in 2022. So for me, I think Brennan Davis is a guy that, again, assuming health with that kind of weird, tricky, mysterious back issue, if he's good in 2023, I think he's a guy that could take the next step to stardom.
And I was going to go with Brennan Davis, but I kind of thought you would go with Brennan Davis. So I was like, I'll go on the pitching side. That, yeah. So, trying to think of it differently, but I'm glad we got Brennan Davis because I agree. I think we would have seen, had he been healthy, we would have seen him in the big leagues already. We would have been talking about this guy's potential piece in the outfield going into this season. As it stands, I think he'll still be a part of the Cubs in 2023 in some capacity, whether that's opening day, whether that's June, whether that's later in the season, I don't know. But I think we will see him in 2023 playing some key roles for the Cubs.
Yeah, and honestly, I guarantee, too, that there's going to be a breakout or two in the bullpen because there always is. We had Brandon Hughes this year, and, in years past, there always is a breakout for sure. Scott Efros, but in large part this year and towards the end of last season of 2021 as well. So I guarantee the guy that sticks out to me is Jeremiah Estrada because his stuff is so nasty. Yeah. So if he can hone that in, get his secondary pitches, really honed in as well, I think that he's a guy who could be pitching the 7th, 8th, maybe even the 9th inning by the time 2023 is over.
Yeah, for sure.
So, that was a great question to start us off. So thank you very much, Wintrust, for that regard. Then we have from some dude named Jordan B. Jordan B. He may or may not work for Cubs.com, but he asked, was Jar Jar, I'm assuming Jar Jar Binks, secretly a Dark Lord of the Sith, the true phantom menace within an abandoned storyline? I have no idea how to address this, so this is all you, Andy.
I mean, it's a fan theory out there that was considered an abandoned theory that Jar Jar was the secret behind the Empire taking over in Star Wars because he voted to give the Chancellor emergency powers, and that's how the Chancellor became the Emperor, and that's how Darth Vader came to be, and the darkness of the Empire came to be. So there's definitely some credence to it. I personally don't believe it, but it's definitely fun. It's like a conspiracy theory within a made-up world, which is pretty awesome.
I like those. Everything you said just went over my head, and I've seen those movies.
There's
and I'm
maybe
with
3 people that will get that, and I'm glad that they're going to get that.
All right, well, for those 3, we are very grateful to Jordan B. for submitting that question. We also have one from Ryan H., who we are familiar with as well. So Ryan H. asks, again, this is just for you, which Cub had the best ULRAG, that's ULRAG, of the year? I think we need to define for our listeners and viewers what an ULRAG is.
So an ULRAG originally started as just like a nice gimmick between some coworkers here at Marquee. It stands for Unlikely Long Relief Appearance Gem. And it was a stat that I made up, 2 1/3 innings, less than 3 runs allowed. That was it. I just thought there were some times where guys would come in whether it was a blowout win or loss, and they would pitch well. And I'm like, they should get credit for pitching well in there. And it started as a joke. It kind of spread. My ultimate favorite, based on the conditions, was Mark Leiter against the Red Sox when he pitched 5 1/3 in relief after Alec Mills, I think, threw 2 or 3 pitches and then had a back injury, and Mark Leiter just had to come in and really shut down the Boston Red Sox lineup and pitched really well. So that's mine. The Luis Garcia in the playoffs just recently, 5 innings in relief in the 18-inning game. That qualifies, and I think that's pretty impressive.
That was very, very impressive to see Luis Garcia do that. But although he was built up as a starter, so I don't know.
But you didn't expect it, so it's unlikely.
True. That's true.
It's unlikely.
All right, that fulfills the you part of this. Okay, so another one that's kind of nerdy here, and again, 3 straight for Andy, which is totally fine from my regard. This is from Brandon Lee, But Undead.
Okay.
So great username. If you could design a Cubs and Star Wars promo/game day giveaway, what would it be, Andy?
So I really loved the Mandalorian that they gave, the little bobblehead that they gave away. I didn't get one of those, but they were really, really cool when I saw them.
So if anybody has one,
putting it out there. That one was really good. But previewing, we might be jumping up ahead a little bit, but I really loved Bodhi Fett. Like Boba Fett, a play on words. I really think like a David Bodhi body with a Mandalorian helmet on would be really, really cool. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Okay. All right. That's pretty good. I think, his status on the roster may be a bit in question too.
But I like the play on words.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a pretty good one. All right. This is one from Casey S. Favorite Cubs moment of the 2022 season. I'll answer this one first because you took the last few. But mine was a little bit under the radar. But when I saw this question, the first thing that popped into my head was when Willson Contreras had Christopher Morel calm down, and then Morel ended up having the game-winning RBI. I thought that was really cool. It was amazing work by our marquee camera operators to capture that moment. It was just a great shot that you can't write, where you see Willson in the on-deck circle. You see Morel turn after getting down 0-2. You see him say calm down. You see Morel take the huge breath. It was like literally a moment that you feel like you watch in TV, in like a movie, and I'm almost getting chills kind of thinking about how perfect this all was. You capture it on camera. He steps in and shortly after gets the game-winning RBI, talks about it after, was very selfless. Willson talked. It was just a cool storyline. So that's one of the things I feel like when I look back at the 2022 season, I remember that more than any other, and not necessarily like a game or whatever else, but that one singular moment was awesome.
Yeah, there's a ton that I'm going to mention them all just so I can get them in there. But say Suzuki's inside the park home run. I'd never seen one live. That was really cool. The immaculate inning by Hayden Wesneski was really, really cool. The Adrian Sampson performance as the Cubs swept the Mets was really, really cool.
Yeah.
But my favorite was a Marcus Stroman in Toronto, where he, the fan meets him and is crying and so excited to meet Marcus Stroman. And then Marcus finds out they're from London, gets some tickets to the London series next year. I thought that was a really, really awesome moment, and just like a heartwarming moment that I think is the beauty about baseball, right? At the end of the day, there's fans that love these players, and these players appreciate that and give that back. I thought that was a really, really cool, wholesome moment to see.
Yeah, and honestly, my honorable mention will go to the 1-year anniversary of Javi Baez breaking the Pirates.
Yes.
And obviously not a 2022, but just that 1-year anniversary as a quick tie. But that's a play that I'll never forget.
That one, that's in there too.
Yeah, I'll use that for 5 straight years running because that was something I've never seen.
Yeah.
So
probably will never see again.
Probably not, for sure. And hopefully, other defenders out there understand not to do what who was it, Will Craig?
Yeah.
Is that who that was? Yeah. All right, so this one from Curtis with a K, using the 2022 Cubs final home game lineup, match each player with their Star Wars or MCU character. So Andy and I were nerding out over this a little before the pod. It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Curtis, for the question. We appreciate that. So this lineup, we'll go in order first, and then we threw a couple guys who weren't in the lineup just because we had other characters and we were having fun. So Zach McKinstry went R2-D2. I'll let you take that one.
Yeah. Does a little bit of everything. R2-D2 in a pinch, can unlock a door, can repair your ship, can do a little bit of everything. Zach McKinstry can play second base, can play third base if you need him to, play shortstop. Thought it was a seamless fit. Does a little bit of everything.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Willson Contreras we had as Obi-Wan Kenobi, but old Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
So like because he's been around for a little bit longer, he's the seasoned vet, as we just talked about with the Morel example. He's kind of he was a guiding force in a lot of ways, I feel like, especially for the young Latin players in this team.
Yeah, that was, to me, the seamless transition. Let's skip ahead really quickly to kind of explain why we said old Obi-Wan.
Sure.
Ian Happ, who batted fourth that last home game, we went with young Obi-Wan because we've kind of seen him do the mentoring and the helping out. Young Obi-Wan mentored Anakin Skywalker, so that kind of was the tie-in. Ian Happ a little bit younger than Willson Contreras, not as much service time. That was the old and young Obi-Wan.
Plus, young Obi-Wan was played by Ewan McGregor, which is very close to Ian. So like Ewan. Yeah, I like that for sure. So circling back, Seiya Suzuki hit 3. Han Solo, and it might seem a little unconventional, but my pitch to you when I said this was he was like this younger hotshot guy who kind of came out of nowhere and suddenly became this integral part and character, which I feel like that's what Suzuki was. I mean, he wasn't even a top prospect. Obviously, he didn't even play American baseball prior to 2022, and now he's a main character, central theme, hitting in the middle of the lineup. Played 130 plus games this year. Like, very important character, especially moving forward too.
Yeah, I agree. I like that one. You kind of sold me on that one at first. I kind of didn't see it. You explained it. I was all in on it. The next guy's Nico Horner. To me, this was a layup. You kind of agreed with me right away. Luke Skywalker. I mean, it's fitting.
They're blonde.
Both pretty attractive young men. Yeah. And they're the future of what is the future of the Cubs. Luke Skywalker is the future of the Jedi. Same kind of concept.
Yeah, I feel like if you're writing the story of the Cubs moving forward in 2023 and beyond, Nico Horner is the main character of that, or at least close to it. Obviously, in Star Wars, from the very first movie that ever was released, even though it was the fourth in the series, however that whole thing worked out, Luke Skywalker was the main character. So this one was fun. So Franmil Reyes was next. I said Chewbacca, and this was just because he's the biggest player in the team. Chewbacca was the biggest player on the Star Wars team.
Yeah, he's the biggest guy. And also Chewbacca was, there's moments where Han Solo's petting him, and then they're having the funny interactions. But when it got down to it, when it was fighting, he was, that was the guy you didn't want to go up against. Franmil Reyes is a big teddy bear. Yeah. That's what Christopher Morel called him. But when you get in the box, you don't want to throw him anything near the plate because he's going to crush the ball. So I thought the comp really, really worked there.
So next up was P.J. Higgins, who played first base that day. So we had as Mando from the Mandalorian series, basically because most of the time he was catching, so he was wearing a big helmet. Yeah. And I forgot the other reason for it.
He kind of goes under the radar.
That's right.
You don't really
quiet, unassuming.
He does a pretty good job, but you don't see it. He's not the flashiest guy. Guys are always complimenting him. Mando gets his job done. Don't really, he's not the outward facing guy. So that was the comp there.
And then you mentioned this one before. David Bodie's up next. The Bodie Fett, I think, is just a fun play on words. So
yeah,
that was it.
Made sense. Easy comp. Nelson Velasquez, Jar Jar Binks. You can kind of test this one more, but they're both so vibrant. They're vibrant. Nelson, you see him in the clubhouse. He's always dancing. He's always singing. He's always talking to guys. Very, very vibrant.
Yeah, and I think just too, like, Jar Jar Binks is like this memorable character, even though he maybe did not have had like a ton of screen time. It wasn't super important to the plot. Maybe that other conspiracy theory you're talking about. But like, I think Nelson Velasquez didn't play a ton, but like he was a big part of this team in a lot of ways, and he was, like you said, a good, fun, young personality. Like brought a smile to a lot of people's face. But that's kind of funny. Did you ever think we'd have a Cubs Weekly podcast where we'd mention Jar Jar Binks twice on it?
I know. This is the most I've mentioned Jar Jar Binks actually in a long time, probably. So
since like last week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Actually, yesterday, but we saw this keep going. The next one is Marcus Stroman, and we went Lando Calrissian, which I thought makes a ton of sense. Very charismatic. Lando was really, really good at everything he did. Marcus Stroman's a really good pitcher. Thought that was an easy comp too.
There was a layup for sure. So that does it from the starting lineup, but we had three more just because I think there were some good fits. So similar to the Jar Jar Binks reasoning, but even to another level, Christopher Morel. You ask fans about him, any other players, but really particularly the fan favorite of the team, I think, in 2022 was Morel. Fan favorite of any Star Wars series, I think, is Baby Yoda.
Yeah, he stole everyone's heart.
Absolutely.
Like, you didn't know that was coming, and then it became your favorite character. Same thing with Christopher Morel. You didn't expect him to come to the major leagues, and when he got here, he was a lot of people's favorite player.
Yep. So I love that one. Yan Gomes was the Qui-Gon Jinn, and you had a great reasoning for this.
Yeah, so Qui-Gon Jinn was the mentor to Obi-Wan Kenobi, was the one who discovered Anakin Skywalker. Yan Gomes has really been helping the young pitchers, helping the guys as they get adjusted to the big league. He's been a great catcher for game planning and everything. I just thought the helpfulness, the master to apprentice type help connection made a lot of sense there.
And then last one, just real quick, David Ross was regular Yoda, or old Yoda, if you want to call him that. I won't necessarily say the word old in David Ross, because we're right across the street and he knows where we work. But yeah, I think, the wise mentor, the guy, we saw that when he was here in 2015 and 16. Yeah. So that's our Cubs Star Wars lineup. A lot of fun. Again, thanks, Curtis, for that question. This next one was from Santo. I have no idea if it's any relation to Ron or not, but essentially asking, are the Cubs going to open the wallet this winter? Will they try to get top free agents? And generally asking expectations for the 2023 season. Simple answer, yeah. I mean, they have a lot of financial flexibility. I think that they will absolutely try to get some of the top free agents. I can't guarantee that'll happen. I think it depends a lot on what the market is, but like any of the top 4 shortstops, any of the top pitchers, maybe even, the Aaron Judge range, or if Nolan Arenado opts out, which I'm not expecting him to. Right. I think some of these guys make a lot of sense for the Cubs. I absolutely expect them to be in the market, regardless of whether they sign them or not. I can't tell you, but I think they're going to spend some money for sure this winter.
I agree too. I think it just makes a ton of sense where they're at given the second half of the season, what kind of transpired over the course of that second half of the season, where some of the prospects are, where some of the young players are. It makes sense to augment that with some pitching, with the potential shortstop, things like that. I think they will, be a player in the free agent market.
And then one here from Lidvingren. I don't know.
It was just
a
bunch
of letters. Yeah, it was on Instagram. So thoughts on the upcoming offseason. So there's not really any specifics for this, so I'll take it a different way. I think I'm going to probably take some time off, maybe go on a trip or something here or there, especially around the holidays. Just kind of enjoy a little bit of the downtime. What about you? Thoughts on the upcoming
Same thing,
offseason?
As the players say, take a couple weeks off, then you get right back into the grind of things, get ready for the next season. Yeah,
you really probably 2-3 weeks off, let the arm rest, and I'll get back off the mound.
Yeah, exactly. Play some short toss.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you meant about the Cubs offseason. General thoughts is I think the Cubs, this is going to be one of the most entertaining off seasons really in Marquee's history, I believe it will be the most entertaining. But just look at what they did last winter, and the 100-day lockout was right smack in the middle. But if you look at it by and large, you have Marcus Stroman, Seiya Suzuki, Yan Gomes, like some of the other pitchers they signed. Like it was a good offseason, and it generated some buzz, but like the lockout maybe dampened that down a bit. I think that there's going to be even more buzz this offseason. I think it's going to be very interesting. Like we said earlier, I think the Cubs, there's a reasonable connection to be made from any of the top free agents this winter, plus potential trades.
Yeah. My thoughts on the offseason kind of similar to that. I think get ready for you and I for it to be a busy offseason. Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot going on, and I think it's going to be a fun offseason if you're a Cub fan.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun for sure. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we'll answer a bunch more of your questions.
We know you love Chicago. You devour the pizza, admire Chicago's skyline, and cheer on Chicago sports teams, especially the Cubs. If you wanted to live in a more boring place, you'd live in St. Louis. Why not bank with Chicago's bank too? Upgrade your wallet with an exclusive Wintrust Cubs debit card, which you can get when you open a Wintrust Cubs checking account. Show your Cubs pride and open an account at wintrust.com/Cubs. Member FDIC, equal housing lender.
All right, we're back here answering more questions on our mailbag edition of the Cubs Weekly Podcast. Andy, KCS wants to know prediction for next season's record. I'll let you take it first.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 86 wins, 76 losses. That's very, specific. I could have gone 85 or whatever, but they played at roughly a 90-win pace after was it right before the All-Star break to the end of the season, starting with that Mets win. I don't think they're going to win 90 games. Yeah, I think that's a big jump for this upcoming season. But I do think 86 is a good number right around there for me for the amount of wins that they'll make.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what you're talking about right there, 86 wins, I think 86 or 87 range, because it's a modest improvement from last year or from 2022. Mm-hmm. That's 12 extra wins. That's not crazy, especially when you consider the potential for better health, especially in the starting rotation, and adding talent and seeing other guys take steps forward, like we're talking about with Suzuki. I think that's totally within the realm of possibility. Obviously, it depends on what happens this offseason, so we'll have another podcast like this and we'll give our updated prediction. But like realistically, just even what the Cubs have in house, I could see an 82 to 84 win team. Supplement that, I think what the Cubs are doing depth wise is impactful, especially in the pitching staff, and will move forward. And then just kind of going along those lines. So Susanna W asked, "Do you think the Cubs will make the 2023 postseason?" I think that they're at least going to be in the running. I don't want to say yes right now until I see what happens in the offseason. But this year, the Phillies they're in the NLCS right now. They had 87 regular season wins. With the way the playoff format is, 86, 87 wins could get you in the playoffs next year.
Yeah, that's where I was. I didn't want to say yes or no because not even just with what the Cubs are going to do, but with what the other teams are going to do, right? There's going to be some improvement, some regression from plenty of teams. What kind of happens is going to be interesting. The 87 win puts you definitely in the conversation. You're definitely playing meaningful games in August and September and October, but does that mean you're a playoff team? Not sure. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think we'll kind of reserve full predictions for, like I said, until shortly before spring training starts. But check back with us then, Susanna and who was that? Casey. Susanna also just said, this wasn't a question, but she said, "I love Morel." So far I do too. I think he's a great kid. So I love that. But there were several Morel questions that we had. Ann L asked, "Do you foresee Morel retaining the multi-tool function next year or getting locked in at one spot?" And then Faceless Man asked, "Assuming full health, how many games does Morel start for the Cubs next year? And is that at multiple positions or center field?" They're kind of both in one, so I'll let you take that first.
Yeah, I think he's still going to be the multi-function role. I think if the Cubs add a center fielder, we might see him play a little less center field. David Ross has mentioned middle of the infield is his spot. If it is, I think we see him augmenting, at shortstop, at second base, maybe at third base, maybe at center field. I think there's still some versatility in having that, or some positiveness in having that versatile option there.
Yeah, definitely. He was awesome when he first came up. But remember, this is a guy who had just 10 games in AAA before coming up. He is a part of the 40-man roster. I certainly think he's a part of the future. But, there's some real holes in his swing in the final couple months as the league adjusted to him. And he really, I thought he performed great over the final 2-3 weeks of the season as well. So maybe he carries that over in next season. I can't guarantee where he's going to play, how much he's going to play. I could see it going one of two ways, where he is a huge part of the team and it's in the super utility role, playing maybe 50 plus games in center field and maybe 40 at second base, 10 or so at short, 40 at third or something like that. Right. Who knows? Maybe backing up the corner outfield spots, whatever it may be. And I could also see a scenario where maybe they add enough impact talent this winter and Morel gets more seasoning at AAA and hones in some of the things they want him to work on. He's still just 23. So, I definitely think there's a wide array of options that could happen with Morel next year. But regardless, I think he's a big part of their future too.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Christopher Morel this upcoming season, and we're going to see it in the same role, which is something that he's mentioned. He's okay with. He wants to just help the team win.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes to one of the other questions, too, of what happens with other parts of the roster. Seiya Suzuki, we know, is in right field for several more years. Ian Happ is in left field for 2023.
Yep.
Is Ian Happ in left field after that?
Right.
He's a guy that the Cubs have talked about wanting to potentially extend it because it makes a lot of sense. He stepped up as a leader, consistent player, all-star. If they extend him, who plays center? Because you have Morel, Brennan Davis, Darius Hill is an option.
Alexander Canario.
And then Nelson Velasquez. You don't have room for all of these guys as well. So I don't know how that all shakes out. I'm very curious to see how it plays out. But yeah, and that's also if Happ sticks. If maybe Happ doesn't stick after 2023 or sign an extension. But I think that'll have a trickle-down effect. So another question here from N. Lampert. Can you guys buy me season tickets for the 2023 season? No, we can't. So next question. KL Duckworth. So this is similar to the Star Wars thing, but MCU, Marvel Comics, or is that with the
Cinematic.
C? Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. So 2016 Cubs as characters from Marvel. I like what they started out with here, so I'm just going to read theirs.
Okay.
Iron Man as Anthony Rizzo.
Yep.
I like that. Makes a lot of sense. He was the guy that was here first,
Yep.
so to speak. Iron Man was the original Avenger, or I guess that was technically Captain America, but Iron Man was the first movie guy that came out. Cap with Bryant. I could see that. The wholesome, guy who I think it fits, especially. Hawkeye John Lester. I didn't get that one.
pinpoint accuracy,
lefty.
makes these pitches. Yeah, like I think there was some fit there. I wasn't totally against it, but I wasn't gung-ho about that matchup for sure.
Maybe it is just the lefty thing. I can totally see that. Hulk Schwarber, I think that's perfect.
Yeah, I think it's really, really good.
Yeah. Star-Lord Baez, I like this a lot. In a lot of ways, I just think Star-Lord is the most fun character, like sense of humor and stuff. And Javi, I think, was the most fun player on the team.
Yeah, I think so. I thought that was just a natural fit. I thought it makes sense.
Dr. Strange, Kyle Hendricks. I like this a lot. Anything with doctor and professor goes hand in hand. So I thought that was kind of perfect, although I think Dr. Strange is more rude and curt and
egotistical.
Yeah,
but
opposite of Hendricks, but the doctor-professor hook, I see.
Both very, very smart guys.
Yep.
Both guys that can, do surgery one day and then save the world, or pitching Game 7 of the World Series.
Yeah, and pulling a lot of strings, which is what Hendricks does a lot with his changeup. So Nick Fury, Theo, GM, architect of it all. Makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Agent Coulson, Joe Madden.
Also makes sense.
Yep, the guy right below Nick Fury. Get that. So who is Thor was the question from Kale Duckworth. Maybe Schwarber, but then who is Hulk? My thought for Thor is Jake Arrieta.
So I actually thought the reverse. He said maybe it's Schwarber, but then who is Hulk? I thought Jake Arrieta, because when he gets mad and he's in there, that's the last guy you want to face. Hulk, he gets mad, he gets big and green. You don't want to face him. I think both work, though.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, the way that Schwarber with the bat could be like Thor with the hammer, so I could see that too. I think either guy are kind of interchangeable for sure. Anything else on there? Like, I noticed no Ben Zobrist at all, but I don't know what character he would be.
Ben Zobrist, that's tough to find a good comp. I'm trying to think off the top of my head something I can improvise and do a little bit of everything. I think Black Panther could create anything you wanted with vibranium, so maybe there's a fit there. That's just spitballing off the top of my head though.
Yeah, overall I thought it was a pretty cool list. So Kale Duckworth, very well done. Photo Kid 3, what's the first baseman situation looking like next year? So we answer a lot of these. We have a State of the Cubs series that Andy and I have done, and we have some videos and written content, so check it out at MarqueeSportsNetwork.com or on the app. First base situation is definitely up in the air, and this kind of goes with the next question, too, from Teddy. Would adding a 36-year-old player with positional limitations be wise? The idea of clogging DH at-bats with a player that doesn't provide Ohtani, Alvarez, or Harper-type numbers or value does not seem wise. I assume what they're talking about is Jose Abreu there.
I think so.
That makes a ton of sense. I don't know exactly what the first baseman situation looks like next year. Again, we've talked a lot about that. But to me, if Jose Abreu is out there, Jose Abreu makes a ton of sense in the middle of this lineup.
I do too. Hits both righties and lefties. I asked David Ross towards the end of the season, are you worried if you added another right-handed hitter, you'd become too right-handed heavy? And he says if they can hit both sides, I don't care if they're righty-lefty. If they're a good player, I want them. The Cardinals are a very right-handed heavy team. Jose Abreu specifically is a guy who hits both sides. I think he adds a ton of value in the middle of the lineup. He fills a hole that the Cubs have. And I think it just benefits the Cubs overall to have someone that can hit 300, that can hit doubles and drive and runs. I think it helps them overall in 2023.
Yeah, and I mean, I get the fact that he's 36 or going to be 36, positional limitations. I don't know that Franmil Reyes is locked in, like he's going to be the DH as of next year, but if he struggles for a month, there's no guarantee the Cubs are going to stick with him for that. At first base, Matt Mervis is a great prospect. There's no guarantee he's going to pan out.
Right.
And even if he does, who better to learn from than a guy like Jose Abreu, who's been as consistent as they come at the first base position and hitting, driving in runs. Dude, even if he doesn't hit 20 homers in a season, which I don't think he did this year, he still drives in 100 runs.
Right.
He's incredible at that, high average, does so many things well. And it would probably be a shorter-term contract. Again, if he's available, if the White Sox choose to let him go, I do think that there's a fit there. And then he could take place as the old Obi-Wan for us if Willson Contreras does move on. So I like that. But, independent of that, Alfonso Rivas is an option at first base, Patrick Wisdom. I think there's a lot of different options, but nothing set in stone. So I think that would be it's an avenue for them to add impact talent. There's not a ton out there besides Abreu in free agency.
Yeah.
JT Stein, why not extend Willson Contreras? So I know we just touched on it a bit, just if Willson moves on. I think that's probably the more likely solution or scenario right now. Why not extend him? I think because you have the opportunity to add impact talent elsewhere, use that money and financial flexibility elsewhere. he is a catcher who, is going to be on the wrong side of 30. He turned 30 this year. Like, he's been great for this team. He's fantastic. He has been a leader. He also deserves to get like the big contract that he wants, and I don't know that that's the Cubs are going to be willing to hand that out because they already have Yan Gomes, who they love his game managing skills, his work behind the plate with the pitching staff. Like, they really love what Yan Gomes adds, and he's 35, but he still has a couple years left as well. They have P.J. Higgins and then Miguel Amaya, who they still believe in. He's been hit, tough injury luck, prospect coming up as catcher. I don't know if they want to lock down Willson in that catcher spot for a while. And like we said at DH, I think there's other options there than having Willson DH 4 or 5 times a week or 3 times a week, whatever it is. But that's kind of my reasoning behind it. I'm on the fence. I see the reason why fans for sure want to bring him back, like any member of the 16 team. But also, I think it might be a pairing or a situation where it's the best of both worlds for both sides, that he gets his big contract and the Cubs just move forward.
Yeah, that's kind of, you saw most of the words out of my mouth. I think I understand why fans would want to see him back, but there's just so much that the Cubs value in Yan Gomes and in P.J. Higgins that they're okay if he were to leave. They're going to extend him the qualifying offer. There's no guarantee that he won't accept it, so you can't totally dismiss that opinion. But the most likely outcome, as you mentioned, is that he probably signs elsewhere, and for most of the reasons that you said.
Yeah, and I mean it's with the new rules too, with like limit on how many times you can throw over to first base and bigger bases. That will probably mean base running and stolen bases are more prevalent within the game. You want somebody like Willson Contreras' arm back there. Yan Gomes is older, but he's still pretty good at throwing out runners too. So. I think there's a lot of reasons that could be said on both sides for sure. Maybe it is something where he takes the qualifying offer. I think it's more likely that he cashes in his big opportunity here. And I think it's more likely that another team besides the Cubs gives him that.
I agree.
So this is from Brock and Jock. Will the Cubs sign a free agent shortstop, or could they trade for one? Is Nico staying at shortstop or moving back to second base? Well, Mr. Brock, this is the question of the offseason because it really is. They have 4. We have Dansby Swanson, Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, and Carlos Correa available in free agency. Again, assuming Correa opts out, which he said he was going to. Those are 4 studs available. They all play shortstop, potentially could play other spots, could move Nico. Either way, this is the question of the offseason. What happens to those guys and what happens with the Cubs?
Yeah, that is the $1 million question. Actually, it's probably a multi-million-dollar question.
Probably $200 million, $100 million.
Yeah. But I think they will add one. I think they'll come to terms with one. That's just me thinking out loud. And if they do, I think Nico Hoerner moves to second base, and it gives the Cubs arguably the best middle infield defense in baseball. That's something when you think about some of the guys they have pitching, whether it's a Marcus Stroman and a Kyle Hendricks who are contact first. You always love to see that behind you if you're one of those pitchers. I do think they'll explore that market and be players for sure in that market.
Yeah, I mean, really, they just need to add high-end talent, star power, which is something Jed Hoyer talked about as end-of-season presser, adding star power. These guys are legitimate stars, and even as they age throughout the contract, the Cubs don't have an in-house option that should lock down third base for years, at least as of now. Maybe Morel, maybe a prospect like James Triantos or Chase Strumpf kind of takes that and runs with it, but as of now, they don't, so maybe one of them moves over there, or Nico has some experience over there as well. Either way, I think adding more good players is not a bad thing. And like you said, with up the middle defense without shifts, it's also a good thing for the pitching staff. Yeah. So, and all 4 of those guys are very good defenders and were rated very highly at shortstop in 2022. Mm-hmm. So, will they sign it? I don't know. I'm not 100% as confident as you are. I think they will do everything they can to sign one of them. I would not be surprised at all if any of them are signed. All of them except for Correa have the qualifying offer attached too, which would mean loss of a draft pick as compensation. So Spins and Steins asks, what are your projections for center field, shortstop, first, second, third starters in 2023? Free agents, prospects, names. All right, so we talked a little bit about center field already. I think another option to throw out there would be Brandon Nimmo. He's a free agent. Again, I think for all the reasons we talked about, there's a lot of outfielders coming up through the system. You eventually probably hand over the center field reins to Pete Armstrong, at least in an ideal world. A couple years down the road, but then maybe Nimmo moves to one of the corner spots. But I do think Nimmo is a fit in multiple regards. I don't know exactly what kind of contract he would get. I'm really curious what the market would be, but he's not a superstar player that would be a $150, $200 million player, I would assume.
But he's a really solid player that you would add to any lineup.
Good defender, left-handed hitter, and he'd be like the guy that you pencil in for 140 games in the leadoff spot. Cubs have not had that since Dexter Fowler. I think he could make a lot of sense as like kind of this dark horse candidate for center field.
Yeah, I love that for center field. I think if they don't go and sign someone like Brandon Nimmo, there's going to be the in-house options that we've mentioned, whether it's someone like Morel, Brendan Davis, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's those options. And I'm also curious to see what happens in the non-tender. I think someone like Cody Bellinger could be an interesting. Seems like he might be a non-tender candidate. Do you take a flyer on him like the Cubs kind of did with Jackson Frazier this past season? There's a lot of options in center field that I think is going to be a really interesting position. Just as interesting almost as shortstop, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And as the shortstop starter, we touched on it. Like if they sign one of those guys and they don't want to move them off the position, then they're the starting shortstop, one of the top free agents. Otherwise, it's Nico Horner's job. Yep. I think that's pretty simple. First base, again, we touched on it. Guy like Abreu makes sense. Maybe Mervis wins the job on opening day out of spring training. Alfonso Rivas an option. PJ Higgins, Patrick Wisdom also kind of in the mix there. There may be another guy or two that they would sign, like Brandon Bell is going to be a free agent. Right. Some other guys that could be fits. I think it's probably more likely to some of the other guys that we just mentioned.
Yep.
Second base, I think, again, depends on shortstop.
Yeah.
If Nico...
It's a domino effect.
Exactly. And really that fulfills third base as well. Like, whatever happens at shortstop, you answer that question first. Then you figure out second base and third base.
Yep.
I think Patrick Wisdom is certainly in play at third. Nico Horner is probably a factor at both. And then Nick Madrigal, if he is healthy and can stay on the field, I think he eats up a lot of time at second base too.
Yeah, and I think Zach McKinstry too plays a role. If you move Nico to second, you have a shortstop. Third base, you put Patrick Wisdom platooning with Zach McKinstry. I think that benefits both players, lefty, righty, righty, lefty. I think it works out for the Cubs' benefit too to kind of have that platoon role there at third base.
Yeah, and then you have Christopher Morel, and as of now, David Bodie's under contract, and
right.
We'll see. Like they have a 40-man crunch this winter, so I don't know if a guy like Bodie or maybe on the outside looking in. It just kind of depends. Same
right.
with center field and Rafael Ortega. Like he could be back. Probably more likely is they part ways with him. But again, we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. I think the Cubs do have a lot of in-house options. I mentioned Chase Strumpf earlier. He and Jake Slaughter have performed well in Double-A. One of those guys could be up playing third base as well in 2023 at some point. Alex W. asks, who is the Cubs' future? I like this question because it's very broad scale.
Yeah.
I think Nico Horner, Justin Steele, Keegan Thompson, Hayden Wesneski were four of the names that came to mind, and Seiya Suzuki for sure. I think those were 4 or 5 names that came to mind first when I read this question and thought about it.
Those were the exact same 5 guys. I was glad you mentioned Seiya Suzuki because I thought that's kind of key. I'll throw in Brendan Davis there too because I think he will be a big part of the Cubs outfield moving forward. There's a multitude of guys that I think we're started seeing their potential in 2022, like Justin Steele and like Nico Horner, what they can do. And it's going to be fun and interesting to see what they can do in 2023, 2024, and beyond. Yeah,
and I think this is such a great question because there are notable omissions there, and it's do they become part of the Cubs' future? Nick Madrigal very well could.
Yeah.
Ian Happ signs an extension, he very well could be a part of the future. Christopher Morel, depending on what he does, or Brendan Davis or any of these other guys, could be a part of the future. Adbert Alzolay, he could step up.
Right.
Caleb Killian, Brandon Hughes is probably in some form or fashion. So I think they're, answering those questions, some of the other Cubs prospects coming up, but Nico Horner, it all starts with that with me. Bold prediction, whatever. I don't think Nico Horner plays a game for any team that's not the Cubs in his whole career. I think he stays here. I think they love him. I think he's perfect in so many regards. So I don't think he'll ever play another game that's not in a Cubs uniform. And the quick thing I want to mention too is Nick Madrigal, these about staying healthy, and these were the same kind of questions we were having last season with Nico Horner, right? It was can Nico Horner stay healthy? Can he blow full 162? Can he play at a good level? I'm not saying that Nick Madrigal can come out and play gold glove level defense and be a 4.5 WAR player at second base or anything, but I'm just saying we can't just dismiss Nick Madrigal. He can totally stay healthy next season, like we saw it happen with Nico Horner this year. Definitely. Samir DeGoat asked, favorite dance. So let's take this one route. Favorite dancer We're not really sure if there's favorite dance. I am particularly the gritty. I love it in NFL celebrations. Can't do it. Don't even ask me.
Yeah.
But favorite dancer on the Cubs, you had a great one for this.
I thought Nelson Velasquez.
Yep.
Nelson Velasquez in the clubhouse, I mentioned it earlier, always dancing, always got a good vibe to him. The final home game when they won and Go Cubs Go was playing, he's the one that's just kind of vibing along to the song while everyone's just clapping. I think it's Nelson Velasquez's best dancer on the Cubs.
I thought Patrick Wisdom. I love that clip that we had in Cubs Live in the pregame show. I think it was in 2021, but it was him dancing and showing off his moves. He did it again when Ian Happ was mic'd up with Boog, JD, and Glanville in the pregame show during BP1s. He was dancing a little bit out there. So Patrick Wisdom, for me, favorite dancer. I think he also is underrated. He's an athletic guy, but I wasn't expecting him to have those kind of moves.
Yeah, he's got really, really good moves.
Yeah, so I'll throw the underrated aspect in there for sure. Chris N. asked a really good question, and Arvis Thur, it's just a bunch of letters together, also asked one as well. Chris asked, if made available, would the Cubs be in on Rafael Devers? A lefty bat at third base would be nice, and if so, what could a potential trade package look like? And then the other question, separate, was trade for Mike Trout with 3 question marks. I think any talk of a trade makes total sense. I'm not 100% sure that they'd be in on a Mike Trout range.
Yeah.
Given, he's had issues staying healthy and where he is, in his career and,
he seems to love it in Anaheim.
Yeah.
He'll
be 31 next year, I think.
Yeah, and I think a return would be astronomical. Yes, if Mike Trout's available, you definitely go in on the conversations. Are they going to get Mike Trout? Very likely not. Can you win the lottery? Yes.
Yeah.
Are you going to win the lottery? Probably not.
Right, asking the package for that would have to be absolutely insane.
Right.
Rafael Devers is a lot more realistic. As for what it would take, I don't know. These are always really hard because I don't know where the Boston front office values it or where the Cubs front office values. I couldn't put a trade package together personally. I think that'd be difficult. Did you have one that you thought of?
I think it would take some combination of pitching and, maybe you're looking at some lower level, high end guy, maybe like a Kevin Alcantara or a Christian Hernandez, something like that. Because Rafael Devers, if you haven't watched Rafael Devers, he's a really, really great third baseman. Offensively, can do it all. Was Player of the Month, I believe, in May. He is just a very, very valuable player that I think sometimes gets overlooked in Boston for what he can do offensively.
Yeah, and going back to especially in the outfield depth, but just the overall prospect depth the Cubs have. Some of these guys won't hit. That's just the nature of it, the prospects coming up. But some will, and Canario and Davis are already knocking on the door. You have a role player like Darius Hill already available to play outfield. You have Christopher Morel, Nelson Velasquez, who already got big league experience. Especially in the outfield, it looks like there's kind of a glut of players. You mentioned Kevin Alcantara. Then you have Jordan Nwogu, who's coming up, through the system. And obviously Pete Crow Armstrong. I think PCA is probably one guy that they won't trade. Right. I know David Ross really values that defense and potential in center. That's still a couple years down the line. Any of those other guys I could see being up for a trade. The Cubs have prospect currency in addition to that financial flexibility. I would not be surprised at all if there is some sort of trade. I don't know if it's the level of Devers. I'm not expecting something to the level of Ohtani or Trout this winter. But I could see that. I think it'd probably be more likely for pitching, a starting pitcher, controllable guy, what the Blue Jays did for Jose Abreu. That made a lot of sense.
Yep.
If there's something like that out there for the Cubs.
Or what the Mariners do with Luis Castillo.
Exactly. That would make a lot of sense, I would think, from a Cubs perspective. That being said, they need left-handed bats. They need good hitters. They need a third baseman probably long term. And they need a guy who can hit in the middle of the order. Rafael Devers is all of that.
I think those were all checked.
Yeah.
Yep, they're all checked.
So that makes a lot of sense. That if I'm the Red Sox, because I want to try to put together a potential trade package. If I'm the Red Sox, and again I've never been in this spot, I'd probably start by asking for a Steeler or Thompson. Probably be turned away. Probably ask for Wesneski. Probably be turned away. But probably want something like a Killian, Canario package. Maybe Alcantara if you want to bet on that upside. Right. And then some other guys Reginald Preciado, Christian Hernandez. Some of these younger guys who are a few years away, but probably something like a near big league ready pitcher like a Killian or an Assad or something like that, and then a guy like Canario or Alcantara, depending on if you want to dream of the upside, or a guy who's close to big league ready.
And that's not to say the Red Sox weren't. They were in the playoffs last year. They're not too far away. They could just say, hey, we really think we got a shot next year. we do one or two things, we're going to keep Devers and he's not going to become available. So there's no guarantee too that they would have, maybe even what we're talking about, they'd still want more because they would want to be blown away because they think Devers is a close piece to making them in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, we also talk about Xander Bogaerts being available among the shortstop market. I don't see a scenario where the Red Sox get rid of both Bogaerts and Devers.
Yeah.
I think if they trade away Devers, it's to re-sign Bogaerts. And if they re-sign Bogaerts and or like whatever, I guess vice versa. If Bogaerts walks in free agency, I would be hard pressed to see them get rid of the entire left side of their infield and blow this up. Because like you said, I don't think
they just signed Trevor Story. There's no guarantee that Rafael Devers is available on the market.
Yeah,
but he would be a great player to add.
Sure, and this is a great thing to ask about and to talk about on the Cubs Weekly podcast here. So we absolutely appreciate the question. Definitely keep all of these coming. We're going to do another one of these probably later in the offseason before the season starts. But this was a ton of fun. Thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in. Thank you for the fun questions about Star Wars, MCU, all that other stuff. We really appreciate just that. Not we love talking baseball, but some of the personality stuff. I always appreciate Andy nerding out because it's kind of fun to watch. So thank you guys for listening, tuning in. That'll do it for this week's edition of the Cubs Weekly podcast presented by Wintrust. Don't forget to download and subscribe to the pod on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Check us out in video form on the Marquee Sports Network app and YouTube. Thanks again, guys.